Buffalo and Toronto, man, what a great relationship these two NHL clubs have. We have ourselves some discussion that I wanted to go over from Darren Dreger, who is a TSN analyst who made an appearance on the Instigator show on WGR Sports 550 in Buffalo. Now, I'll try to find a link to the actual audio hit and put it in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to the actual hit, because Dreger does make appearances on that show quite frequently. But we're going over onto the Charging Buffalo's Twitter account, because what they did was they summarized what it was that Dreger ended up saying on the show. These are conversations that I think that are actually pretty intriguing, which is why we're making this video in the first place. Here are some Sabres tidbits from Darren Dreger's appearance on the Instigator show. Kevyn Adams has made it abundantly clear that they're in the market for top 6 forwards and bottom 6 forwards as well. He says the Sabres are looking to add on defense. They feel they need to improve their blue line. They feel like they've got to bolster it. So there you go, 2 pieces of news that are just like, okay, they're improving the forward core. They're improving the defense core. I mean, that's not really news, but okay, it's cool to see it in writing. But when it comes to goaltending, it appears that they're also trying to improve that as well. I think, Darren Dreger says, that the Sabres are willing to take a chance on goaltending in free agency. Right or wrong, the Jack Campbell rumors in connection to Buffalo continue to swirl a little bit. Whether the Sabres see Campbell as a fit is another question, though. So this is our rumor as per Darren Dreger on WGR 550 Sports Radio, the Instigator show. Jack Campbell, Toronto Maple Leafs goaltender and UFA to be, and the Buffalo Sabres. Does this work? Let's go over both of these individual parties and acknowledge where they're coming from in relation to this entire thing before we go over my thoughts on the likelihood as to whether or not we're going to see this manifest. The Buffalo Sabres right now are a team that have a lot of cap space. They've got $35 million to spend, and they have to re-sign a few guys. Olofsson, probably going to demand a lot of money. You could probably pay him because you've got a lot of money. You've also got Vinny Hinostroza, you've got John Hayden, Cody Eakin, they all need contracts as well, but I mean, you're not really going to go out there and probably spend the most money possible on these players. Same could be said for Mark Pysyk. Maybe Colin Miller could get a little bit more. Same with Will Butcher and whatever, but I don't really think it's going to be that bad. And then you have a few other players on the IR and your goaltending that are also going to need money too. Craig Anderson, Tokarski, Kajula, Subban. None of these guys are going to break the bank, and you also have Ben Bishop, who is on your LTIR. In fact, you acquired Ben Bishop because you wanted to reach the salary cap floor in the first place, and the Sabres, I mean, with their $35 million in space, they're gonna probably have a lot more room to spend as well. Now, when it comes to these goaltenders over here, Tokarski is a guy that sort of bounced back a little bit this season. It was really cool seeing him break back into the NHL and actually play pretty okay, all things considered, for Buffalo this year. Craig Anderson is an absolute legend, but the guy is 41 years old right now, so his future is up in the air. And you also have Malcolm Subban, who has been on the IR, so it's difficult to go out there and project his future with the team. For Craig Anderson specifically, though, I do think there was that article talking about how he's not sure if he's going to play next year, but either way, if Darren Dreger's assessment is correct, that the Sabres are going to go out there and try to bolster their team via free agency on goaltenders, then I mean, Jack Campbell is probably the best one that's going to be on the market, is he not? Jack Campbell is 30 years old. He's 6'3", 207 as a left-handed catching goaltender. As we said, he is going to be a free agent, assuming the Maple Leafs don't re-sign him. He was drafted all the way back in 2010, 11th overall by the Dallas Stars. However, his career never really solidified with that system. He played a few games here and there. He was up and down with Dallas and with Texas. He even went to the ECHL as well. He eventually got sent over to the LA Kings, where he played and developed even further in the Ontario Reign system. He had a .928 save percentage season in 31 games played in 2018-19, cementing himself as a guy that could take over the reins as Jonathan Quick's successor. Now, we know that didn't happen because he was traded over to Toronto a little bit later, and this season he posted up a .914 save percentage and a .264 goals against in 49 games. Now, those numbers are not as good as what he had last year. They're not as good as what he had in 2018-19, for example, but Jack Campbell, when he was on his game, he was really on his game, to the point where he was honestly one of the better goaltenders in the entire league in certain few week spans. Now, it wasn't like that the entire season. He did have a few down weeks here and there. A lot of that might be due to mental, a lot of that might be due to health problems as well, but Jack Campbell, for all intents and purposes, was the Maple Leaf starter, and he was a good one at that. He had himself an 8.97 save percentage in the playoffs against the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's kind of interesting because his performance last year against the Montreal Canadiens was a lot better. He had a 9.34 save percentage and a 1.81 goals against the Habs, which is actually kind of phenomenal when you think about it. But he lost in Game 7 in both of those series, and now you acknowledge that he is 30 years old. He's coming off a season where you had multiple Vezina caliber stints throughout the year. I know the Vezina is not awarded to the guy who has the best stints, but it's awarded to the guy who has the best season in general. For Jack, he was kind of in that conversation once in a while, but never really long enough to realistically consider himself a candidate, especially with the down stints he had during the 21-22 season. There's a lot of pressure on the guy, and he's been very hard on himself, very open in the media about how hard he is on himself, and that's been one of the more defining traits about Soup during his time in Toronto, that even though this guy is a good goaltender, even though he sometimes does not play like a good goaltender, we all know at the end of the day he's a good dude, and he's somebody that we all want to see succeed. We also had an update here a few days ago saying that Campbell and Mikheyev have both yet to receive contract offers from the Maple Leafs. Now, I know this idea is only a few days old and things can change like that on a dime, but at the moment, this is kind of the status quo that we have with these players, and Campbell is a part of that conversation as well. Which is why, if the Buffalo Sabres come in here and they say, hey, Jack, you're 30 years old, this might be the contract that you get that defines the rest of your life, here is X amount of dollars, and we'll try to give it to you so you stick around in our squad as a stopgap before Devin Levi comes over. It would actually make sense. However, for Jack, you're gonna probably see this guy maybe get a long-term contract that's in the, let's say, 4, 5, 6-year range even. And if it gets to that point, I don't really know if the Buffalo Sabres would be the team. This is what ex-Bialy Orzel says on the Sabre subreddit. Other than term, there's absolutely no question that Jack Campbell would be a fit in Buffalo. He's a great locker room guy, no ego, and he provides decent goaltending. If his problem is term, then you try to overpay. But at the end of the day, if he wants that 5 to 6 year contract, you have to let him go. And I think that's a really interesting point that is brought up here. If Jack Campbell does want that 5-6 year deal or whatever, and you can say, okay, sorry, Jack, we can't give you that amount of money because Devin Levi's going to be here, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's going to be here, we might still have some other guys, maybe Malcolm Subban comes back, who really knows, but here's $7 or $8 million for 2 years, or 3 years maybe even. You want to stick around short term on a pretty good price tag? I mean, we're not really supposed to be all too great of a team. If you lose games, it's not really a big deal. Like in Toronto, there's a lot of pressure. If you lose a game, you lose a playoff series, everybody's talking about you, everybody's saying trade you, whatever. But here in Buffalo, I mean, we're not really close to getting that soon, so have a good time here, man. Come on. I think it actually could do Jack Campbell a few favors to just allow himself to be free while playing the game, because we know that when he is completely out there with no strings attached, nothing weighing on his mind, he plays the best, and he is a very good goaltender when he is under those specific peaceful circumstances mentally. Not that he wasn't good against against Tampa Bay and against Montreal, it's just the playoffs, you know, sometimes your team just doesn't show up for you, and that's kind of what Toronto did, and Jack Campbell was really ticked off at himself when he talked in the media about it, but like, they even called him out on the broadcast on Hockey Night in Canada. Kelly Hrudey was like, yeah, no, you gotta stop talking about yourself like that, Jack. Stop giving the blame to yourself, because sometimes it's just not your fault. But either way, if he heads over to Buffalo, I do think that that element to his psyche will be eliminated in some respect, and I do think that might be a positive thing. It's just, you know, you can let me know in the comments all your thoughts about whether or not that is the case. If you are a Buffalo Sabres fan, though, what are your thoughts on Jack Campbell heading over to your team? Maple Leafs fans, everybody's talking about how you're going to get Ville Husso, you're going to get John Gibson, you're going to get other guys because Jack Campbell might just go to free agency and you can't afford him. If he goes to Buffalo, how does that make you feel? How do you feel about Soup and the body of work that he has put up, heading over to the Buffalo Sabres, your, let's just say, short-distance rivals, I guess, and a team that has, honestly, your number once in a while? It's kind of funny to see how often the Buffalo Sabres beat the Maple Leafs, especially on big games in front of stadiums worth of fans, but either way, talk in the comments all your thoughts about the idea of Jack Campbell coming over to Buffalo. What is a contract structure you'd be you'd be okay with if Jack Campbell does make his trek over to Buffalo, New York? Let me know your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Trolls 99, and bye.